Welcome, symbol lovers, to another edition of Understanding the Symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. And this time around, we're going to be looking at the Haywain by Hieronymus Bosch, which is a 5-panel altarpiece consisting of 2 outside panels that we see here, and these open up to reveal 3 inside panels. And we'll be figuring out what it's all about by using a few of our principles for understanding the symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. And we'll begin with context. Hieronymus Bosch was about 50 years old when he painted this, and this is his last major work that we know of. And this is probably a self-portrait of Bosch himself as this lonely, impoverished wayfarer. So this is a spiritual picture of Hieronymus Bosch. By the time Bosch had painted this, the Spanish Inquisition was in full swing, and along with their torturing and burning people at the stake, they had also exiled 20 to 180,000 Jews, depending on who you talk to. They had expelled them from Spain, forcing them to sell their properties. They could only leave with what they could carry. And so these thousands of Jews hit the road. Some went to Italy, some went to France, and some went up all the way to the Netherlands, where Bosch would have encountered them. Bosch would have been in sympathy with the Jews because he was secretly an Ebionite, or at least a Neo-Ebionite. The Ebionites were the original followers of Jesus. They were centered in Jerusalem, and they were led by the brother of Jesus, James, who was the head of the original congregation. The original Ebionites were very Jewish. They kept the Jewish laws, they frequented the temple, and they were declared heretics by the Christian church and hunted to extinction, with their traditions only surviving in secret in a few monasteries by the time of Bosch. So Bosch would have been very sympathetic to their plight and would see himself as perhaps a future victim of the church. Thus, he portrayed himself as one of those sad, ragged people on the road, because he was on a spiritual road, and it was equally sad. That is, he was sad about the affairs of the world he lived in, and that's what the Haywain is all about. Before we open the panels, let's see what we can figure out using our guidelines. And the first thing we're going to do is find it in the Bible. What's going on here? So in Luke 10, Jesus is giving his great parable here of the Good Samaritan. And remember, it's always about Jesus. Okay, Luke 10 reads, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell among robbers. They stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. But a Samaritan on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him." Then Jesus told the man first in the law, who had started this conversation, "Go and do likewise." So the dilemma for our wayfarer here is, even though he has troubles of his own, will he stop on his journey and help the man who has fallen among thieves? And you can see that's caught his attention. He's looking over his shoulder. He knows what's going on, but he hasn't made that decision to be compassionate yet. He is torn between his obligation to help the man that's being robbed, or going forward, crossing that bridge into the land of music and courtship and merriment. He is a man stuck between two trees. On the right-hand side, we have the tree of life, and we see life going on underneath it. But on the other side, we see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the evil taking place. And spiritually speaking, this is a life and death decision. Notice the gallows directly over his head. That's not by accident. As a follower of Jesus, he has an obligation to do likewise. And that's what the pack on his back is. That's his responsibility. So we can see he's got responsibility on the one hand, responsible for his fellow man, but his head and his heart are on the other side, and they want to go on, cross that bridge over, and join the music and the courtship. So that's the spiritual dilemma of Hieronymus Bosch. And now it's time to open up these panels and look at the spiritual dilemma for the whole world. There are 3 inner panels to the Haywain. That's why they call it a triptych. And we're going to dispense with the right and left panels real quick here. So in the left-hand panel, we have scenes from the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve bringing the knowledge of good and evil into the world. But what's really useful for our purposes is what's happening up in heaven. And here we see heaven being cleansed of the rebel angels. So originally, all the angels were good, but when they turned to bad, they got pushed out of heaven, and as they fell to earth, they took on the shape of insects and other crawling creatures. They became much less than angels. And when we see creatures in the paintings of Hieronymus Bosch, it's the same idea. They aren't really monsters and creatures. They're actually people who have made themselves into monsters by their actions. This is from the right-hand panel. And notice the 3 figures on the left. We see that deer person, a human being, and what is definitely a monster wearing what looks like armor. So we have a soldier, a victim, and a deer. And of course, deers are very nice. And notice this engraving showing people being led off to being burned at the stake. On one side, they would have a soldier, but on the other side, there would be someone who was not a soldier and also was not clergy usually, but it was a comforter, somebody that was allowed to walk beside them to keep them calm so that, things would run smoothly. So here you have a monster, victim, a heretic, no doubt, and a deer, a kind, gentle person, but it's just to aid and abet the murder of the heretic. And so that's why they're a deer person. They aren't a human because they've made themselves less than human. And they're performing this kind of phony act as a deer. But, they're just as bad as the monsters. And they're certainly less than human, is what the symbols are saying. And this brings us to the right-hand panel, which frankly isn't very good. And it was probably done by an apprentice using the drawings of Bosch. And I've got no scripture to add, and we'll say no more about it. So now we're ready to tackle the main event, the Haywain itself. And we'll be using our principles for understanding the symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. And the first thing we're going to do is remember that it's always about Jesus and to find it in the Bible. So first, is there anything in the Bible that matches what we're seeing here? And of course there is. At that time the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And further, behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. And that's why Jesus is naked and holding out his hands, so that people can see his piercings. And lastly, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they were oblivious until the flood came and swept them all away. So will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. And there you have it. This is a picture of the second coming of Jesus. He's showing his wounds for all to see, while below him people are oblivious, marrying and being given in marriage. So here we have, first of all, a Bosch owl telling us this is a valuable lesson. The wise will learn from it. And below him we have two couples, one marrying and the others being given in marriage. The foremost couple are very chaste, and they're being given a music lesson by their chaperone. And even the married couple, we have another chaperone behind the bush there watching them. So they haven't been quite married yet, apparently, because they still have a chaperone. But the ones in front are courting, and they're torn between an angel and a demon. And they're doing just fine. So these oblivious lovebirds are riding high on the top of a wagon load of hay. And so our question is, what does the hay stand for? To answer that question, we'll go down now to the very bottom of the painting, and especially over at the right-hand side, where we have a microcosm of the church. So what have we here? We have one well-fed monk who is pretty much the only person in the whole composition that's at leisure, and next to him is a nun she has no straw, but she does have a rosary, and she seems to be praying for the monk. Next we have two peasant women who seem to be stuffing their hard-earned hay into the monk's bag. And to the left, we see a woman kneeling and offering straw to a piper. She is paying the piper. And pipers don't pipe for hay, they pipe for cash. The hay represents wealth. Most of the hay or wealth in this society goes for the pleasure of the few, with a little skimmed off for the church. And there you have it. This is a picture of the second coming of Jesus. He's showing his wounds for all to see, while below him people are oblivious, marrying and being given in marriage. He will also find all the wealth, symbolized here by the hay, is gathered up in one place for the comfort of the few, while most of the mankind, most of the society that Jesus would find in the days of Bosch, were living in mud huts. So the lives of the people all revolved around the wealth of the nobility. So here we see the low-life monsters that are pulling the wagon, and there's a bunch of social climbers. They're not trying to steal the straw, they're trying to get up on top. and for their troubles they're being mangled under the wheels as often as not. There's a little mayhem and murder surrounding the wagon, and following the wagon we have another group of people. So we have either a dead man or a dying man. We have another man who is making a fool of himself, but perhaps he's mocking the other man who seems to be reaching for his throat. We have a social climbing woman, and riding comfortably on horseback is a king, a pope, and various nobility. Now at the bottom of the painting, we have people who are separate from the pursuit of wealth and the obsession with social climbing. And that is the people at the bottom. We have the church, which is getting it's more than its fair share of the wealth. We have a musician, we have a doctor, we have a group of women that I'm just going to classify as the world of women. They're very peaceful and they're taking care of an infant. Very nice. And as far as he can get from the church, there is a man teaching a child. And I believe this is another self-portrait of Hieronymus Bosch. This is how he felt his job was in this world, to make things clear for the next generation. So they're over to one side where they have a clear view of the wagon and society and how it's working. And he's got a walking stick. And as I showed in other videos, a walking stick is always a sign that the person you're looking at is a follower of Jesus. And so he's doing his best to teach her the ways of Jesus and the ways of the world. And so that's another self-portrait of Hieronymus Bosch. So to sum up, when Jesus returns, he is going to find the wealth of the world serving just a few people, and that the great powers of the world will follow this wealth wherever it goes. But this wealth is being led by heartless, mindless monsters. And the common people are likely to come to a bad end if they center their lives around getting close to the wagon of power. Better to be a doctor or a musician or a teacher or even at least a peaceful clergyman, rather than join the folly of the wagon. So that's the sermon of the Haywain. It's exactly what it looks like. And it looks to me like it's time to hit the road. And this has been Understanding the Symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. Give me a like if you liked it. Give me a comment if you didn't. Thanks for watching.